Recording.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Sacramento Sword School's Destreza lecture series. I'm Puck Curtis. I'm one of the hosts, and Eric Myers is our other host. Tonight, our lecturer is José Javier Salazar. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. He's always had a passion for all things nerdy, and when he finally got tired of fantasizing about being a badass swordsman, he decided to become one. He sought out the nearest HEMA club, and as luck would have it, he found what is currently known as Esgrima Histórica Madrid, EHM, one of the biggest and oldest HEMA schools in Europe, and the place where AEEA was founded. That's Asociación Española de Esgrima Antigua, which was founded by Alberto Bomprezzi. He not only learned Destreza with Alberto, but he was also personally trained by other unsung virtuosos like Carlos Urgel, Marc, Gerner, and Oscar Torres. Furthermore, the close ties between the AEEA clubs allowed him to get access to a lot of other talented Destreza artists, such as one of his personal favorite fencers, Juan Guilmain. Am I saying that one correctly? Do you want to say that one for me?
Juan Guilmain.
No, I did all right.
Yeah, you were close.
Not quite there, but close. Wanting to be a larger part of his community and to grow as a fencer and hemaist, he volunteered to teach. Finally, he was invited to take AEEA's instructor's exam in 2017. Since then, he's contributed to the teaching and training of EHM students, following the hands-on practical philosophy of Maestro Bomprezzi. Currently, he is the lead longsword instructor at the school, where he's committed to the application of the universal theoretical principles behind Destreza theory to this teaching of the longsword, since they were declared agnostic by the old masters. Lately, he has started participating in both international and national events, putting his skills and approach in a trial by fire. His talk is going to focus around his teaching methodology and his growth as a teacher. And additionally, aside from the things that he just put in his bio, having known him, he's been a part of the Destreza in the SCA community for years and years and years. And always, my perception has always been that he felt a desire to help the English-speaking community tease apart the more challenging parts of Destreza theory. Has been a constant champion for that and a really positive influence in that group. So I love what he does there, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Puck. So let me set up my screen a bit. Okay, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
We can see it.
Yep, it's good.
Okay, awesome. So first of all, let me thank you, Puck, for this opportunity and for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here, and I have my presentation, quite honestly, kind of short. It's not going to be very groundbreaking. I just wanted to showcase more or less what we do at my school. And so I was going to start off with like introducing myself, but basically like Buck went through just read my bio, so that's awesome. So that's something I can skip. So basically, I've been teaching for the past 5 years. Destreza in my school. I like Puck said, I passed the instructor exam back in 2017. And I currently hold the instructor title and degree and the Jugador Viejo degree in my school. I'll go into a bit of detail about that later. So the Esgrima Histórica Madrid was founded in 2002 by Alberto Bomprezzi. It was one of the first HEMA clubs in mainland Spain, and it's currently one of the biggest as well. It's the founding member of the AEEA as well. So basically, what I want to do today is like give you a brief introduction to the EA, how I started out teaching, how we organized our beginner course in our school, how I became an instructor, what it meant going from teaching the beginners course into teaching the main class. I'm going to go into a little detour of what this teach what you know concept, which is kind of important for me. And then I'll end the lecture on how we organize our main class and what we want to get from the main class. So the AA was founded in 2002, the same time Alberto founded his school, more or less. So what he wanted what it stands for, first of all, is Asociación Española de Esgrima Antigua, if you're curious about that. The main objective was to create this unified set of clubs which followed the same mythology, had the same uniforms and titles to create this unified school of fencing. Going into a bit of detail regarding the titles, I think they're the most successful thing the AEA did, in my opinion, and I'll explain that why later. So basically, they're very simple. It's very simple hierarchy. We have 5 titles for students. They enter as students. They move on after 2 years into advanced student. You actually can see the patch we use to identify advanced students over here. We have then jugadores viejos, diestros bachilleres, and diestros licenciados. Diestros licenciados is an invite only. So you have you don't only have to be experienced and knowledgeable, but you also have to have the skills to be a diestro licenciado. And then for instructors, we have this parallel hierarchy. We have instructors, which is the lower level, which I am currently, which we hold this red bandana. A bandana, is it called? When it wraps around your arm? Well, never mind. For provost, we have a blue one, and maestros wear a black jacket. So these degrees proved to extremely useful, especially in giving the AEA a sense of coherency. Not only did the examinations to get these titles provide us all with a common mythology, but it also provides for a common language and a common culture we can identify each other with. Sorry. And this at the end provides a sense of unity. So a student from Sevilla can easily come to a class in Madrid and easily identify who the more or less the skill set of who's he talking to, identify what's going on in class. We approach fencing the same manner, so it really helps us keep the class together.
Javier,
so very
before you move on, sorry, we have to interrupt when you're speaking to ask questions. I wanted to ask.
Armband. Okay, thank you, Louis.
Yeah, it's an armband. Oh man, I lost the slide and I lost the question.
Sorry, let me open it again. Regarding instructor.
Yes, so the different levels of students. So obviously, I think your instructors go through a board examination.
Yeah.
Do the students have an exam to advance in level?
Yes. Yes. Sorry for not mentioning. To advance to the next level, you always have an exam. We usually invite the student once we know they can pass the exam. They're not difficult exams. It's like more of a showcase of experience and knowledge, so to speak. So this also have a board exam in front of a tribunal. I have some couple pictures in the presentation you can see later on if you're interested.
Yeah.
Here's one actually. So that's the exam for Monica. I think this was last year or the year before, doing a longsword exam for diestro bachiller.
Right. It's interesting because it sounds like a lot of what you're describing is a classical fencing culture applied to Destreza as a system.
Well, I don't know what to say exactly because I've never been part of a classical fencing culture, but this is a very practical approach to how to set up a school, set up a simple hierarchy among your students and instructors. So I wouldn't find that odd, like a cultural convergence thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you for your instructor track or your fencing track, is it based on weapon or do you mix things? How does that work?
They're not actually based on weapons. We do study several weapons. So this was actually a matter of debate we had a couple of years ago because some people said that just because you have your advanced students in longsword doesn't mean you're an advanced student in rapier. And we said, no, if you're an advanced student in the school, you're an advanced student in the school, period. So no, it's more like a agnostic thing. Like your title is, your degree is such within the school, independently of the weapons you study.
So you may have a preference or a specialty or more knowledge about one or the other, but
yes,
the title doesn't require you to have proficiency in all of them.
No. For provost, we do demand that they know at least 4 weapons.
Okay.
And that's about it, I think.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you for answering.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any further questions?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna explain a bit the AE's approach to the Destreza. This was actually like gone into more detail, I think, with Alberto Bomprezzi. So I'm not gonna like stay here along a lot. So just to point out that we have a very practical approach. We use we have a very practical approach towards fencing and Destreza in general. We think like every theoretical concept should be approached from a point of view from your practical experience. So sparring for us is a very important pedagogical tool, not only for students but for teachers as well. And one of the biggest things we focus on is in recognizing and admitting to differences by fencing. Oh, sorry, recognizing and admitting to differences created by fencing in the 21st century culture and mindset compared to those by fencing from a 16th or 15th century context. So just not only focusing on the equipment, stuff like the mask, the sneakers, but also how physical fitness, the purpose of doing fencing in the first place. Back then, it was more like a class related thing. Now it's more like a fun activity one does. And with that, I will like start explaining more or less how I started out in fencing and HEMA in general. I started fencing in 2013. I was back then. I was like 23 years old. I wanted to do something. I was a really big sword nerd. Basically, I was really attracted to like video games, RPGs, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that. So I was initially going to Kendo until I found like a video of two guys sparring with long swords, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely what I want to do. So around 2015, the time I took my advanced student exam, I found like this is something I really, really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed the fencing, the culture, the history behind the Destreza. I also really enjoyed my community, the people who surrounded me, and I said to myself like I want to really be a part of this as much as I can. And I saw a path through which I could see further personal growth for me. So I volunteered to teach, and I talked to Alberto and at the time Rorro, and he told me like, yeah, you're good enough to teach the beginners courses. And so I did. And basically I started out by being like support, like a support role for another teacher. They gave me like the groundwork on how they approach students, what they seek in classes, how to teach them appropriately, basic methodology and all that, mainly to let me grow and develop my own. So the first thing I noticed, like, it's what a wide net HEMA casts, so to speak. Like it attracts so many different folks for so many different reasons, and sometimes it helps like knowing why they're there, why they're interested in HEMA, why they want to do this. Like it's like dumb stuff, like the kind of jokes you tell them, the kind of comments you make, and stuff like that. But if within all of this wide population, let's call them, one of the things they shared in common was how curious they were about what we were doing, like how little idea what HEMA actually meant. And it's normal because still HEMA is like a very niche minority thing, but I don't know what to expect. They don't know like how much time they have to devote to this, how much physical effort, training, classes, stuff like that. And this is like and this is something important to keep in mind. For the beginner's course, it's not only the first contact with HEMA, but also with your club and your teaching staff. And at this point, this is like the most important point for their like career in fencing. Like you can either be seen as something like worth doing, something respectable, something with like work behind it, or just be seen as an oddity, like I don't know, like something you do for a couple of weeks and comment with your friends.
Can I ask
So,
a question?
yeah, sure.
So, and maybe you're going to jump right into this, but what do you
Yeah.
think is the way to make that point? How do you guide the student into that?
So for me, the first thing I did very consciously was to keep it basic. So yes, I'll answer your question. Sorry, Buck. So the very first thing, like, keep it simple. Don't overwhelm them. Keep the terms simple. Keep the theory simple. If you if they feel they cannot follow your class, they won't engage it. Basically, we keep the actions very basic. We don't demand too much of them. We don't do compound attacks. We don't do like several actions in one single class. We keep it simple. They can follow it. We don't intimidate them. I don't want them to like feel like they're useless. And at the same time, I want to let them know like what they're learning is part of a larger whole. Like it's what we're doing then, what we're teaching them is the building blocks on which they can later grow over and develop their own style of fencing. And more importantly, like for me, this is very important. Like you're not just some random dude with a sword hitting each other. You said like, man, you set up your school. You've put work into it. You've got practice. There's a coherent theory. There's a coherent methodology behind it. And I think that's the more important part. Of course, you will lose some students because like everyone has their own reasons to leave a school. But basically, if you got like this basic mindset for them, like this is like serious work. This is like a serious martial art. Basically, they will stay. There's a higher percentage of students will stay with you. So, did I answer your question, Puck? Sorry.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. If I speak too quickly, don't be afraid to pause me. I'm a very nervous person. Okay. So let me move into into how we develop the beginner's course, basically. What we wanted with the beginner's course was to like provide a bottom-up style of teaching. Like we set up the groundwork on which we will grow further. We will plan further concepts and techniques. You know, like let them grow at their own pace. We also didn't want to like demand too much of them. At this point, it's still the beginner's course. We want them to be familiar with the concepts we're teaching. We don't want them to like to be the Jedi master that comes out of a 2-month course, I don't know, kicking anyone's ass. That's not feasible. And our main goal at the end of the day, what we want them is like to move off the beginner's course and be able to join the main class without losing track of what's going on. So this is the basic curricula, so to speak, of what we teach in the beginner's course. So we start off with basic footwork, move to tretas particulares, bindwork, and universales. To go into more of detail in basic footwork, we teach what the more linear stuff. We don't do too much into offline work because basically if they're going to have problems with going backwards and forwards, going to the sides or in circles, it's going to like lose them. At this point, we teach them like the compass, the half step, and the passing step as basic tools for the footwork.
Jump in before you jump to the next slide because you're going a little fast.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I want you to go back to the footwork slide. Well, actually, let's go back to this other slide. So you've got some tretas particulares. That's thrusts, cuts, and half cuts. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And that's typically how people are going to be more used to seeing them. But can you have slides for each of these topics?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So when we get to back to the footwork, can you unpack lower plane coordination and distance for me?
Yes. Basically, lower plane. This is their first interaction with the lower planes. This is lower planes. If you don't know what it is what we call the lines in the ground. So basically, this is like the diameter line, the infinitas, the transversals, the circles, stuff like that. So basically, the Destreza circle, we call it the lower plane in our school. That's how we usually refer to it. So, and this is also, we also ask from basic coordination from them. So, for example, we ask them to start coordinating their hands with their feet. So it sounds something like really dumb, but many people that come into your class are not going to be are coming from like 0 level. They have never done anything before, and something like they start like managing. And we also start working some distance management, basically like pair up with a partner and try to keep always the same distance. Not don't do anything fancy, just move backwards and forwards, follow them. And is that what you meant by unpacking, or?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure everyone's familiar with the term lower plane, so I just want to make sure that we have our terms well laid.
Okay, so if anyone wants me to go into more detail with some concept or like wording, don't worry to ask. Like one of the things that the AEEA is like we actually develop our own language, so sometimes things that come naturally to me, people don't usually get. So if you want to stop me and ask a question, there's no problem with that. Okay, so let's move on. So another very important thing that we teach them is the tretas particulares.
Actually, we did just have a question then.
Sorry?
So from Los, what does compass mean on its own?
On its own, like we use it to refer to a type of step. Usually, when you see it on the manuals and stuff, it instinctively refers to like especially in Pacheco. I think he has like a 6-foot compass. So that's obviously a compound compass. So, but when we refer to compass, we usually refer to a movement where the forward foot, or the foot more closest to the direction you're moving in moves first.
So it's a standard fencing advance in this case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And half step, like the step for the foot furthest away from the movement moves, and the passing step is a passing step.
Thanks.
So move on to tretas particulares. Thrust, half cuts, and cuts. So this is the first time the student has contact with the sword. Basically, we start developing some basic biomechanic here. We teach them how to throw the thrust with the whole body, move the sword with your body instead of just your elbow or your sorry, ¿cómo se llama la muñeca? With your wrist. Sorry, and at this point, this is something particular for us. I haven't seen any other school do this, but we do have different grips for rapier, according to where the pommel is located in relation to your wrist. So this is at this point we also start doing some basic paired work. We teach them like the distance at which you can wound with a cut, or distance you can wound with a thrust. We also have like set up targets in the wall so they can start doing like long lunges, which they won't be able to do because of the low equipment they have since they're new. We also move into bind work. Afterwards, we here they start feeling how the sword interacts with each other with transferencias. I always start with transferencias. You can teach them easily what degrees of strength are. How you can overpower another sword just by moving with very little strength, just by moving up or down. We also teach them basic.
Sorry, I think you're going to have to define each of these terms as you go.
Okay, so transferencias basically what means transference of degrees of strength. So I think we're all familiar with degrees of strength. So basically, you can do an aumento or disminución.
Yeah, movement of increase and decrease.
Movement of increase, movement of decrease, to gain an upper hand in the control of the blade. Libramiento is what we call lower disengages, when you disengage through the hilt. Formaciones are when you disengage over the tip. Desvíos are basically when you remove the sword from, so someone's throwing the thrust and you just move it away with your own sword. And diversiones is, for example, when someone gives you puts a tajo on you and you just give way to it, you don't resist to his action, so you end up in like an acute position. We start doing this basic bind work for them, so they can understand how swords interact with each other, and they start to get a feel over control of the diameter line. At this point, it also helps them like understand lines of attack, like knowing like if you do this view too hard in this position, then you're open the line of attack on the other side. Where are you safe? Where is your sword? Where do you place your sword to be safe? Where do you place it so you're not safe, and stuff like that. We also start explaining some medios, some most basic of medios, basically the medio proporción and medio porcionado. At this point, you are safe. At this point, you're stabbing him or you're being stabbed. And then move into the universales. This is like, for us, universales are crucial. We always go back to them. This is like, we do them every single class. And these are like complex concepts, so we just wanted to be familiar with them. We do give some examples of neat conclusiones, but we don't know what these concepts are, right? I mean, atajo, right angle, and conclusión. No one has a question about this.
I don't think so. I'm curious why right angle's not in italics.
Oh, it's because in English. It's in English. So basically, I put in italics the word in Spanish. Sorry about that.
No,
So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so basically what we want at this point is to recognize the action, but not master it, and that's we asking too much of our students. So I understand that every school has a beginner's course due to several reasons, and I want to acknowledge the benefits we find with the beginner's course. Basically, this is for the club. For you as a teacher, this is your first contact with your students. At this point, you can easily identify any issues the students might have with your class or how you're teaching them. Are they picking up quickly on your concepts you're explaining? Do they have trouble? Are they do they have physical any problems that might stop them from learning as fast as anyone else? You can do a little gatekeeping just in case. And also that very low volume of students can let you have some personalized attention for them, especially with someone who comes brand new and is like unsure of what they're doing and they're curious about it. Like I said before, this is like the most important part for you to keep them as a student, and the personalized attention at this point really helps. And also for the student, you also have the benefit, like they're not being thrown into the wolves. You're not doing like the main class with them immediately. You're teaching them very basic concepts at that point, which might not be really well explained in a more advanced class. And they're also developing their own like kinesthetic control of their own body and their sword that they might not have time later on to develop in the main class, or the opportunity to develop in the main class. Also, of course, there are problems with having a beginner course. You do need like the appropriate space or the appropriate time slot to have it, or if you don't have neither, you need staff to take care of the beginner's course for you. We are very lucky in my school. We have like our own space for us. We rent out directly from the owner, so we don't depend on a GM on our school to manage us. So we set up our own time slot. We have our own space to do this, and we have a large staff.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you've got this sort of safe beginner space set aside.
Yes.
How big are the beginners classes usually?
To be completely honest, like coronavirus has, wrecked us. So currently we're having like 20 students in our main class and maybe 1 or 2 students in our beginner class. But at our peak, we maybe had like 8 students in our beginner class.
And when they move into the primary class, not during coronavirus, right? It's
I understand.
right now. But when things are going as they normally do, how big is the primary class?
We peaked at some point at 40 students, and it said like that was unviable. So we had to like change our how we organize classes. So we started spreading them out a bit because we didn't actually have the space for such a large class. So we aim for something around 20 or 25.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any further questions? Okay, so
actually, sorry, I did have a question. So for your beginning class, you said it's a 2-month session?
Normally I try to keep them no more than 3 months, but it really depends on the students and how well they're doing.
Right. So do you have everyone else in the main class, or do you separate? Do you give advanced students some additional time, or is it just everyone in the main class and you divvy them up by skill or shared skill, or how do you work?
We have the beginner course in the main class in my school, and the main class we really promote people pairing up with people with different skill level. We also have a lot of exercises that end up rotating your partner. So we don't see them. So something that actually concerned us was veterans only pairing up with veterans and newbies only pairing up with newbies, and it's something we actively avoid in while teaching the main class. Is that what you're asking, or?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking.
Okay, I'll keep moving. So in 2017, I became an instructor. I did the exam. I was invited to do the exam and became an instructor. So become an instructor mainly meant that I was teaching the main class on my own, and I quickly noticed it was a very different dynamic. And from the beginner's course, there's a much higher volume of students, and not only was there not only did you lose the ability of giving such personalized attention as before, but you had like a large mixed bag of experience and skill sets. You had people like in my club. When I started teaching the main class, I had students that had been doing HEMA and fencing for like 15 years, and sharing a class with a kid that just came in and it was the first time they were at the main class. And the different backgrounds of these students give you different problems. From new students, my main concern always was that the fear of them being intimidated by the main class. We actually had a situation where we had a group of people that didn't want to move into the main class and stay in the beginner's course because they were much more comfortable, like having only a class of 8 doing simple stuff than moving into a class of 25 and doing new stuff they weren't familiar with. And they were perfectly fine. Like, they were doing great, but they didn't want to move on. And also they haven't interacted too much with the main class, so they're like still like outsiders. They already established their own like personal circle in the beginner's course, and maybe you're asking them to like leave that and join the big 25 people pack. And from older students, my biggest fear was making them feel as they were being held back, that maybe that they were learning nothing or achieving or receiving nothing from my classes. And I think like if you do that too much, you will only cause burning out between your students. And I think it's truly tragic when you have like a student that has been there for over a decade or over like 8 years, stuff like that, and they just get tired they just get tired and stop going to HEMA. Also, a problem these students may present is that they actually know enough to disagree. This doesn't have to be like a negative experience. Any good feedback is good feedback. It can always be turned into good feedback, and people are normally, especially if they respect you, they won't like try to like screw you over. They will like talk to you, ask you questions, stuff like that. So, but mismanaging this type of situations can really lead into you losing face in front of your other students, and that personally for an instructor is like a death sentence. Like if your students don't respect you, they won't go to your class. So basically, I teach what I know, and I want to digress a little for this concept because it seems very simple, but at the same time, when I talk to people over how they teach and stuff, so I get the impression that this is something people don't actually agree what it means. So I'm just gonna give you my opinion. Okay, so for me, reciting a treat is not enough. So due to the practical approach I've been taught by Alberto Bomprezzi, Carlos Urgel, Marc, and from all the input I have from other AEA members, like for me, your understanding of theory and Destreza should come always from a practical experience and a practical viewpoint. Basically, when I'm starting something new, I don't think I understand it unless I can find the use of it inside the concept of sparring or its niche, so to speak. Also, especially for techniques, like if I don't execute it perfectly and I don't execute it in the moment when it has to be executed on demand, it's not something I am ready to teach someone else. For example, the canonical tretas generales, like línea en cruz, estrechar, and the flaquezas. I don't actually teach them that much because currently I don't think they have much use. Like everything Treta General can do, it can be done by Universal and better. So, and my opinion is this: is that these tretas were defined in a time where people were like very barely using any protective gear. They were like not wearing face protection, stuff like that, and which led to like very high positions with the hand, high ángulos rectos. And today we have a very different context. We have like obtuse always, bouncing up and down, distance, moving in outside of a distance. And for me, they lack a modern niche, like a modern niche. So we do teach them as such. Like we do have courses on historical context, basically like this is how defense back then, and this is why, and we're gonna try to recreate as much as they can. But of course, you're creating like what I call like artificial artifacts. You don't like when you're pretending you don't have face protection, and you do. It's something like you're assuming the other person like it's agreeing with you, kind of like a little, I don't know, you know. So we do teach them as such, but with a caveat like, this is how they did it back then, this is why, and today this is why you won't find much use for it. So that's why I don't personally teach them that much. We digressed a little, so let me go back on track. So how we created the content for the main class, what we aim for, and our practical approach. So basically, what we always wanted was to keep all students engaged with the class. We want everyone to feel like they can get something useful out of it. For the newer students, means that they can follow it easily, like they understand everything being explained to them. Nothing's too complicated. We're not going overboard with the content. The class, we can complicate it later on, but it starts simple. It's a gradual increase of the complication. And on the other hand, like no one feels like it's too simple for them, too easy. We want them to feel like they're always like at least training or polishing something. And at the same time, something we kept in mind when organize the content for classes is that you cannot actually demand them to assist your class. This is not a school. You're offering a service. If they don't want to come or they can't come, there's nothing you can do about it. And another important thing is that no one progresses at the same speed. Unfortunately, someone is going to be faster or stronger than someone else, or smarter, understand, or pay more attention. So that's why in our school, we don't have scheduled curricula. We don't expect to teach something over the course of X months or X weeks or X days. You can't really calculate how fast or slow you should go for all of your students, especially if you're dealing with large classes with a lot of changing phases in between. So our solution, so to speak, was to organize content into blocks, like theoretical blocks, self-contained theoretical blocks. We organize them and design them in a way that you don't actually need to see the previous blocks to understand what's going on. We do ask like you do the beginner's course, you have a very basic concept of what we're explaining, and it helps if you like have a consistent assistance to our classes. But if you just like, I don't know, you have a 3-month stop or pause or whatever, and you join again, you can follow our class, no problem. We also try to keep like this logical flow between classes, like between blocks, sorry, that one always segues into the next. So for example, if you're teaching, I don't know, if we're teaching like dispositive cut from an atajo, maybe the next block we're going to go into conclusiones against people that throw cuts directly from being atajoed. So content-wise, maybe repeating myself a bit, but again, we design classes considering keeping all students engaged. We wanted classes where our new students could follow and learn what we're explaining, every single concept, that nothing was way too new or way too exotic for them. And basically, where veterans can like at least polish their skill set. If they're not seeing something new, we're going to enjoy the class and be engaged by it. So my solution for this was always to base my class in situations I find myself inspiring. Since for me, this is like the maximum application of theory you can do, like show them that this is you're going to find this situation inspiring, and this is how we solve it within the context of Destreza. So we have a very heavy focus in sparring in my school. We usually open the class 3 hours a day. We do 1 hour, one weapon. We switch to another weapon the following hour, and the last hour is just pure sparring. We try to like promote sparring as much as we can between our students. We try to make the spar as soon as possible. We have landing equipment, we have swords, masks, some jackets, and I think like sparring is one of the most useful things you can do as a fencer. It provides a laboratory you can play with, you can experiment with what you've learned, you can experiment with things you've seen somewhere else. And it's also a very result-driven training. Like this has a very basic concept. You have to wound and not be wounded. You have to touch or not be touched back. So sorry, lost my train of thought there a moment. Okay, so another benefit we saw for our students is that they provide feedback to each other. So even if we're teaching, if we're currently on a theoretical block teaching something, the student can explain something else while sparring, like how to do a conclusion correctly, why an atajo in the medio proporcional should be done like this way and not that way, how to move across the circles, stuff like that. It also promotes a lot of social bonding between students, which really helps if you want to maintain the constant registry of your students. Like a student that has friends or a social circle they hang out with normally in class really helps them come back later on. There's also like peer pressure, like, hey, where are you? Why aren't you going to class? Stuff like that, which really helps it's very positive for them and for you as a club owner. And for me personally, my point of view is that if you're not a good fencer, you're going to have serious problems understanding the theory of Destreza, since this, as abstract as Destreza may be, it's all based on very practical in a very practical context. Also, personally for me, it provides introspection. Like I can really measure easily myself, how well I'm doing, what do I need to focus on in my training. Am I being praised some tactics? Am I responding well to this? Can I atajo well? If I do this, what will the other one do? So this is like also for a lot of personal growth as a fencer.
I have a question.
Yes.
I caught you just in time.
Sorry, what?
In the beginners class, are you sparring in that class?
Not, because basically we don't have enough equipment for all of them. So for example, we have like 6 masks and maybe 3 or 4 jackets for lens. So for safety reasons, we don't let them. Maybe if they bring their own mask, we let them spar, like supervised sparring, so they don't do anything like stupid, because you never know what you're gonna see in there. So as much as we wanted to make them spar as soon as possible, we do keep like a sense of safety.
And so they're in that space for about 2 to 3 months. Then they go into the primary class. And are they expected to spar when they join that class?
Sorry, are they forced to spar?
Well, are they expected to spar? I'm not sure
Not
would force anyone.
No, we do want them to spar, but people don't like. I know some people don't like to spar and are only there for like the classes. So it's not something for me. If you're focused on fencing, if you want to do this for fencing reasons, you do have to spar, but that's not the only reason you do HEMA for. I've seen people who are interested in that historical aspect, people who are interested in the more cultural aspect, stuff like that, and some people just don't enjoy the sparring. Simple as that, and they enjoy the class but not sparring. So we don't force anyone, and we don't ask to tell them why are you not sparring, or like pressure them to spar. Like we want them to spar, but we want them to be like doing it comfortably.
How do you bring somebody into that space? So like when we bring somebody in for the first time for sparring, usually like Eric or I will spar with that person and get them comfortable.
Yeah.
How do you work them into that space? Because they're going from this sort of safe space into this much larger space with veterans, and I feel like that can be intimidating. So how do you help them manage that transition?
We basically start sparring with them personally, the instructors and the teachers, and we also like promote. Sorry, give me a moment. Okay, we also promote them sparring between if they can spar between the beginners class, we promote that they spar between themselves. We also start sparring with them, tell them like what I don't know, basic things like don't do that, don't hit people in the groin, don't kneecap each other. So it's complicated because sometimes that even if they're supporting them next to them, supporting them, they won't feel like the courage to do it. So that's why we also ask like older students to ask newer students out, so to speak, like for older students to like approach newer students instead of the other way around, which barely never happens. And we also have like a friendly culture inside our club. So even if you're like a 10-year-old dude that's been doing this for like 10 years, they won't like massacre you for no reason. They will like let you play with your sword, let you figure out things for your own. And I think that's does that answer your question? Or
It does, and it's sort of, I was curious about that, but what you're describing sort of mirrors the advice Carranza gives in his first book. So it's nice.
Thank you. So sorry, I ramble a bit there. So I'm basically almost done with my presentation. It's a very fast presentation. So just to recap, our approach to the Destreza, our approach is completely practical. Towards the Destreza, we think like this is a choice you're gonna have to make at some point in your club. Are you gonna move more focus in historical recreation or in just pure fencing? And if you chose fencing, like you have to admit that the differences between then and now, and you're gonna have to adapt the stress in one way or another to offer a very practical approach or interpretation. We are also very practical towards teaching. Everything we teach is born out of our own personal experience in sparring. We never like make up things on the fly. Everything we know, it comes from experience, and we also very practical towards our students. We believe that your school is only good enough as your students. So it's very important for us to like provide good fencers in that respect. So I want to thank you all for listening. Sorry if I spoke too fast or something. Like, I'm happy to take any questions you had throughout the presentation right now, or to talk about it or something.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of those salutes when I visited in Madrid.
Yeah.
Really lovely.
Yeah, we did have a number of questions earlier. Do you have a link between your fencer levels or ranks and becoming an instructor? Like, do you need to become a certain level of fencer before you become a certain level of teacher?
We actually depends on the club. In my club, they do demand some a couple of years at least being an advanced student or a jugador viejo. But out of necessity, if like we someone suddenly opens up a club in a city in another city and they don't actually have someone to teach them and they're completely new, we do say what's the word? We do let them be instructors without having much idea, basically because they need the authority for it. Like, I'm an instructor of the EA and I teach a class. So we, before the whole crisis blew up in our faces, the coronavirus, stuff like that, and when it was financially viable, we did have like a national instructor meetings where we did provide classes to each other and debated ideas, interpretation, stuff like that. We lost that a bit, sadly, mostly because of financial reasons, which is kind of sad considering. But yeah, depends a lot of the club what they demand for their own instructors to teach.
So in general, though, I mean, without a special situation like that, if you were an advanced student, you could still become a provost?
I mean, difficultly, I think no. Like provost, we it's a very advanced title already. So so yeah, I mean, I understand what you're trying to ask me now. Yes, there is it's parallel, but there is some correlation basically because you barely ever see someone below Diestro being a provost or an instructor.
Okay.
And basically because of what the exam demands.
Okay, so are you, to turn this now to you, like I'm just curious about what your strategy is and how you're approaching your future. Are you practicing both for the next fencing level and the next teaching level, or are you like focusing on one and then you're going to try to focus on the other? How are you personally approaching that?
Yeah, since the provost exam is normally an exam regarding how you teach, your methodology and stuff like that, and your student exam is more of your own progress as a fencer. So sometimes, many times, well, normally actually they do them both at the same time. So my exam for jugador viejo was my exam for instructor as well.
Oh, okay.
So because there's a lot of overlap in the theory.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Wait, question from John Golden. How do you generate all those new beginning students? So we actually with Alberto, we're very lucky because he has a lot of media pool. He has a lot of contacts. We send out flyers to tabletop shops and stuff like that. We also do a lot. Used to do a lot of public demonstrations, one of the pictures you were seeing actually of all the people lining up was done in the Alcázar of Sevilla, and that always it's good publicity for your club.
We have a question. Do you
We need
draw
you to
a
build an
line?
ancient castle that we can have demonstrations done.
Yeah.
Do you draw a line between Destreza adapted for a modern context and fencing, which is not Destreza? So that's a good question.
Yeah. I think like depending on their approach, because the stress is like not only like a theoretical so my opinion is that like each master developed their own theory based on how they approached fencing. For example, like the stress is much more concerned about control and about control of the center line. Sorry, I got distracted with the chat. Control of the center line, much more about a more tactical approach. So you can really see the difference how people approach fencing in that regard. So someone that does the stress side, you can see them like they always try to look for the bind when it's available. You always try to go for the central line, stuff like that. So I think you can easily recognize the stress up that is to modern context to the stress up that isn't. That is just like people going for the people from other schools or schools of thought.
What would make a technique vulgar then?
Okay, so from my point of view, so something we say a lot is like any technique can be made true if you're doing it in a context that makes sense, and there's like you're doing it for let's say for a reason. For example, like it makes sense to do that according to what you've teaching. Like if I just doing like enarcadas blindly without considering where the opponent's sword is, yes, I consider that vulgar. If I do like cuts to the arm, but they don't make sense when there's no opening, I consider that vulgar. But if there's someone like um, doing it like consciously, there's a tactic behind it, a mythology. I consider, especially if it's based on distress, if that's what you're asking, I consider them true.
That's perfect. That's you actually said something that one of my students likes to say all the time. Is like, I may take a vulgar technique, but I will make it true.
Yeah, it's something we truly like. Jaime Buesa says it a lot. Like every third sentence he says is that basically.
So one of the things that I particularly enjoyed about what I and Alberto has done is he's examining masters, and that can be a very controversial
Yeah.
decision. But he went ahead and did it, and I'm glad that he did, and I certainly support that. But I want to ask you, what was your exam like, the structure of it?
My own exam was we generally for all instructors and my exam as well. We have like this. We have a theoretical portion, a practical portion. We have a teaching portion, and then we have the free sparring. So for the theoretical portion, they ask me like questions regarding Destreza, some basic Kunstfechtens, and then we move into like practical, like execute actions. For my exam, I remember I had to like with rapier and dagger. I remember one of the questions, which was how to close the line according to the position my opponent was in with rapier and dagger. I had to explain how the Meisterhauen worked for Kunstfechten, and I had to explain the right angle, like go deep into the right angle. And then the teaching portion, they ask us to teach a class, like grab a new volunteer and say you have to teach him something. Please show us how you proceed, basically. And for the free sparring, they basically give us free sparring and judge on how you develop. Like they don't want you to be like the best fencer around. They do want you to be like proficient. They want you to like be comfortable with the sword and know what you're doing. Like have a system per se. So asking for Phil Swift, he's asking about a longsword. Sounds like this is going to be sound like heretical, but we do the stress up with longsword, and then fill the gaps with German longsword. So it's like this. I don't say it too much in public because it sounds it's very like frog DNA in there. So that's so yeah.
Fair enough. I think that's reasonable. We have Montante, but I don't know that we have much in the way of Destreza longsword.
No, we have
any
yeah.
Destreza long.
Well, yeah, if I think it's more like a cultural thing. Longsword really didn't take in Spain. And you're like, if I'm going to use a 200 sword, I'm going to use a really big 200 sword.
Right. So it's traditional for us to ask the question, can you talk to us about acometimiento? So what is your take on acometimiento?
Cometimiento. I usually, like, when I teach and stuff like that, I use a lot of the word acometimiento perfecto. Sorry. For me, like, I use it in the context of doing a perfect threat. You're threatening the face. You're not fully committed to the attack yet, but you can be, and your intent is to provoke a reaction. So I don't know if that's something new, if that's been said before.
It lines up pretty closely. Do you feel like acometimiento is a feint, or it's a right angle manifesting as a threat? Where would you lay that down?
Well, I think that, like, the most basic acometimiento I cheat is actually reducing to the right angle. Like, the opponent starts like a thrust in a position, and you reduce to a right angle in front of the face, and then, like, disengage from below. Like, that's a very simple action I teach sometimes. But feint. I wouldn't actually call it a feint. Well, yeah, no, wait. It isn't a feint in a sense you're looking for a reaction, but at the same time, it's not an empty action. Like, if you see that your opponent doesn't react to it, you just can't repeat the feint and actually wound. If you know what I mean? It's not like longsword phalanx, where it's just like feinting while keeping protected. Very similar, but you also have that direct threat to the face. So for Keren Wang, basically, if we okay, so Keren Wang asked, can you expand on not finding much use for the generals? So in our school, we are very big on dividing the techniques according to dignidades. So we have first dignity, second dignity, and third dignity. First dignity are the medios universales de defensa, atajo, right angle, and the conclusión. Second dignities are the tretas generales, and the third dignities are the tretas particulares. Sorry. So basically, first dignity is better than second dignity and better than third dignity. And anyways, for me, currently, I can achieve what the tretas generales try to do with first dignity actions, and therefore I don't see a use for them. Like, if I can obtain the same thing with an atajo, at that point in time, I don't see a reason why not to use an atajo.
So you would move down the hierarchy of dignity when
Yeah.
your higher dignity techniques aren't yielding the results that you need.
Yes, exactly.
It's sort of like a flow chart.
Yeah, basically like like decreasing flow chart of quality.
Right. Any more questions out there in the chat?
So I just have a question about how you approach the dignities that way. Is it really about quality, or is it that one thing is ideal and there must be some situation where ideal doesn't work, and that would be what prompts you to use something else, right? So can you talk more about like what would have you move down the line, so to speak, in the dignity?
So so basically, okay, so if I understand the question, like, why do I consider the first dignities better than the second dignities? Is that what you're basically asking, or what in which situations the first dignity wouldn't work? And start
yeah. So what is it specifically about the first dignities over the second dignities that warrants that distinction? And
okay,
if they're better in that way, then what is it about the second or third level dignities that makes them useful at some point where a first level dignity would not be?
Okay, so basically, if we have to identify the first dignity actions, we have the atajo, the right angle, and the conclusión. Okay, the atajo provides us with not only with control of the opponent's blade, it denies the wound, their direct wound, and it provides you with a direct path to wound. That's for control of the diameter line. That is essential. in any blade work, like through transferencias, libramientos, diversiones, you can achieve the atajo. The right angle gives you an extremely useful tool where you occupy, by reducing yourself to the right angle, you can occupy the most direct path that can use to wound you and provide a very effective threat. And the conclusion, if you're really good with your atajo and the right angle, you can get to a disarm without actually going to hand-to-hand combat, like no grabs and stuff like that. The generales, in my opinion, they don't actually provide the control. They don't work on the degrees of strength. They don't, as I interpret them, they work by how to explain this? They don't provide the same level of protection and quality of protection as a first dignity. So sorry, how to explain this? So when you do a dignity, and this is something like Pacheco says, actually, like when you do a dignity, a second dignity, a treta general, it can be so easily undone by a medio universal. So when you're at Tajo, the way to escape to Tajo is like get out of there and do a Tajo yourself. Against a treta general, like to a Tajo. It's a very simple thing, very ineffective in my opinion nowadays. You don't have actually the opportunity to use them so much. You must kind of rely on the other guy to give you the opening to do it. So that's why I don't believe in them. Like I don't see their use too much. Like I can do the same thing but better with an atajo. I can do the same thing better with a right angle.
Well, I think that your answer is definitely indicative of your practical approach, right? I'm not trying to do that, but
I know.
But in terms of either in history or how you see other people doing it, what is it that would, like, why would someone use a second dignity action instead of a first dignity action?
So in theory, you use a second dignity action when the first dignity actions are not available. We do have an interpretation of some of the generales. Basically, it's where they act sort of like atajos virtuales. Basically, when the opponent is not interested in giving you letting you like work with the bind, and they keep pulling back their sword, stuff like that. And this is actually explained in Modo Fácil y Nuevo. If they go into like if they go to the rectitud, the trazada derecha, like Pacheco says, fracasa bajo la fuerza. And once they start attacking you with use of the right angle, and for example, against people in the high position, pues either do like an estrechar, well, as they come down and stuff like that. So they do have a use, some of them, but it's very like
it's not in terms of their dignities. It's not necessarily that they're lower quality, but they have qualities.
Well,
that come into play when your first level dignities aren't available to you.
I don't think when the qualities were defined, and I don't think like they were defined just by the quality, but rather by the how much you use them in sparring. I'm sorry, in combat, so to speak. So it's how tactical use. In fact, the tretas particulares like cuts, thrust, and half cuts are like one of the most extensive things you'll do. But since like they're considered outside their tactical approach, the tactical use, they are considered like the lowest dignity action in fencing.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
We have a question from the audience, and this is the questioner says that he knows that Alberto has worked with heavier swords at times, and probably you have too. And I'm guessing this is probably dealing with rapiers or early rapiers. Have you found that heavier weapons make the generales more useful?
It really depends on how the other person is fencing. If it's something like very cut intensive, you're not gonna have the place to find actual the generales. If they're more like calm, looking for the bind and working really really high positions in the right angle, mostly like covering the face, stuff like that, you will find the opportunity to do the generales always. But again, that's not like very common to see. Mostly with heavy weapons, what you see is like people striking the legs, striking the hands, arms, obtuse positions, low body, low body weights or not, like low centers of masses, stuff like that, people bouncing up and down. So this is not a very an environment that really allows for people to play with generales.
One of the things I remember that you guys had said in the Destreza and the FCA group was that the generales were an action followed by an attack.
Yeah, that's an interpretation. I know people actually defend that and discuss that a lot. Basically, it's, I don't remember where it was said, but some manual says that the treta is an action that ends in a wound. And therefore, tretas generales, according to that interpretation, tretas generales always end in a wound. But if you read how tretas generales are described, they are not executive actions, perhaps dispositive actions. They are meant to like place you like in a position of advantage over your opponent rather than go for the direct wound. And if from that position of advantage you can wound, but it's not something you do directly or that allows you to do that directly. I don't know. That's basically that. This is a discussion we have like every other month.
Yeah. Well, one of the places that Pacheco, when he's talking about counters to the vulgars, he says do something as if you were doing one of the generales, right? And so it leads to that question is like, is this a very specific action, or can we adapt these circular actions and still call them generals?
I think like we have, due to our practical approach, we don't actually like putting things in very concrete definitions. Like we do it like the atajo, we see it as a concept. We see it like a tool to achieve something. But for example, Rada actually defines 8 atajos, and we just call them atajos, stuff like that. So for approaching for generales, I think that maybe you have to adapt them for certain actions against your opponent. Like I think there was a thread once in the Destreza and the ACA, and I think I was talking with Phil Swift and I actually explained this. Like the only general I actually use in sparring is basically flaqueza bajo la fuerza, and instead of using it like an action to then move into that straight thrust, I use it like an atajo virtual when people keep pulling their sword back, and that's the basic general I always do against people that don't let me do an atajo. So I don't think like going to say like that's not a flaqueza bajo la fuerza. Flaqueza bajo la fuerza is very like useful for that.
So we had somebody ask a question, and this kind of leads into that, but if you're attempting to place an atajo and the adversary does a disengagement, and you can, would you consider a circle with that atajo back into the atajo again a general, or would you call it a circular atajo?
Sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So let's say that you're looking for atajo on the inside line.
Yeah.
And the adversary removes the point underneath your weapon in a disengage. You follow in the same circle and retake the atajo back on the inside line. Would you call that a circular atajo, or would you consider that a general in which you found an atajo?
I consider that a disengage and atajo from the inside again. Like we don't actually use the terms atajo circular too much. Like we did explain it too much, but for our like how we approach fencing, we have atajo on the inside, atajo on the outside, atajo on the beginning and the middle, but not atajos circulares. And for me, as described, that would be a disengage and atajo on the inside again.
Okay. But it would still be the same action. It's just the naming of it.
Yeah. Basically, it's semantics. Yeah, I don't like Rivera at all. Sorry, I don't like Vietmal at all. Sorry, Rivera.
I don't like him at all. Oh, that hurts.
Freudian slip. Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if there are any more questions. I don't remember. I asked about your instructor's exam and what that was like, and it lines up like what your organization has constructed is very much like a classical instructor's exam, traditional classical fencing. I'm curious about the fencing master's exam and what that's like.
Yeah. So I've been to a couple of master exams. These are all public exams, always. So you can always go there and see them. It basically follows the same approach, the same the same, like, how to call it, the same four chapters, not the same four sections, like the practical section, theoretical section, teaching section, and sorry, the free sparring. Of course, the difficulty of the question is much larger. We also bring out fencers from other schools, like very good fencers, to like push the maestro to their limits. But again, like this is like I just said, this is a very charged title, and for me, from my point of view, like this is an internal thing. That doesn't mean he's a master of Destreza. It means he's the master of the AEA, and that's it. And that's a very important difference. Like, we're not calling ourselves that the best that's ever been, or like usurper of a check or something like that. What we're saying is like we have our own set of standards, and within those standards, this guy is a maestro of that.
I think that's entirely fair, and within like the community, I've made an argument a lot like that. I don't think anybody, well, maybe there are a few people who want to be like the fencing master police to the universe, but I find that really not very useful.
Yeah,
And
I mean, with title like this, the only thing that matters is how much respect they have for your school. Like, if, I don't know, somebody comes up to me and says, I'm a master from such and such school, and I've never heard from a school, of course, that title is not going to mean much to me. But if you're, for example, if you respect the AEA, or you think like they're good fans or stuff like that, the title master then actually means something. So it's a very relative. It means on its own, without any context, it's meaningless. It all depends on how where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So have you encountered pushback in Europe from other groups about people creating masters?
Yeah. We had drama regarding that. So sorry, James. So we have basically the FE. We had like this how to call it, like a friendly competition with the FE, because it disagreed with a lot of the things we did in EAA. And that's, I think, they were like the first ones in the heart, and the ones that pushed back the most against us. But yeah, like it's I don't know, it's to be expected. Like, it's a very charged title. We are big, very big, so pushback is always expected from anywhere.
Is that mostly in the past now, or is it still going on?
Well, yeah, it's mostly in the past, basically, because the FE, I don't know if the FE is still active, actually. So I think it's in the past.
Maybe it's because they didn't create any masters.
But sorry. Yeah, basically. No, it's active. It's active. I don't know. Like, I've haven't like engaged a lot with the FE. So yeah, basically, another thing, very important thing for the EA is like having future for the clubs. Like, that's why we're so big on having students and instructor titles. Like, for example, if I move somewhere else, I can start my own club and keep the chain going.
Right.
Yeah, I think what you said there, like, we come from a classical tradition, where like Maestro William Gogler passed away about a decade ago. But if he hadn't made masters, the tradition would have died with him.
Yeah.
And I know that Alberto has tested at least 3 masters now, so he's created 5.
Yeah, we have 8 masters right now.
8. So he's got enough where he can have 2 boards going at once if he needs to.
Yeah, exactly. Which was very important for us. Like, before, according to how the AA worked, everyone that had to take like a important examination, like a provas or something like that, had to go to Madrid, and that is not something feasible when your organization grows. So we just added more masters so we can like have multiple boards across multiple cities.
Yeah, and it's absolutely essential to if you're going to use a classical framework, to have enough masters to support it. Well, it looks like the questions are petering out.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions before we shut it down? All right.
Well, Andrea has a question. Yeah. I usually use rapier and longsword. So I love rapier. I love all the weapons. I'm starting savior now, but mostly you'll see me with a longsword in hand. We don't do pole arms or broadswords. Since we're so focused in sparring, pole arms, there's no like a safe way to spar with them. And broadswords, we don't have like a culture for broadswords yet. Teaching what you know. Can you give an example case study? Okay, so for Lewis saber, which source for saber, we use what was his name? Not Frias. Let me check because I do have it here, the book. Give me a second. Sorry. Merelo. Sorry. Yeah, we do Merelo. Yeah. The other one. No, Merelo. Exactly. Thank you, Lewis. I had like the book next to me and I can't remember what the guy's name was. And for example, Andrew Peterson, like for conclusiones, an example like teaching what you know. I think, sorry, Peterson. Aleix, I think in Barcelona they do Vendrell, but I'm not sure. Like I've been there and they talk to me about Vendrell, so I think they do study in there. And for Peterson, like the basic example, if you go to the conclusion, I think I have a very like practical approach on how to teach it. If you go to the book, how canonically it is explained, it's basically you go to an attack from medio proporción, you go an atajo, you achieve ángulo de capacidad ocupable, and from there you do the conclusión. And for me, like I think that most of the exercises, as they are explained in the manuals, they're not there for like actual examples from sparring, but they're like to provide basic introductions, basic introductions to concepts. Do you need me to explain what the occupiable angle is, or do they know?
I'm trying to type it into the chat, but it would be better if you just say it.
So the occupiable angle appears a couple of times when they explain the conclusiones mainly. It's a very useful concept. And I use it to many things, but for some reason, when I read the manuals, I only see it applied to conclusiones. Basically, it's the space you can create to move your body in, the space you can move safely into with your sword, created by your sword. So basically, after an atajo, you create a space you can advance in safely. So that will be the angle, the occupiable angle you have created. So the way I teach conclusiones, one of the basic advances after it, inside angle. Not really, because you can have, for example, an angle capacity. You can have an occupiable angle under the sword. When you do a high cut and you parry it, you have safely created a space you can move under it. Oh, he does. Okay, I didn't know that, Puck. Sorry. And so how I teach the conclusion is like after the atajo, the opponent forms the cut, and you parry it with either a reparo or an atajo as well. And since you have this, I also explained this, used to explain the appropriated medio proporción. So you appropriate the medio proporcionado, sorry, and do the conclusión. So that's a very like practical example of how to teach something, because it's a very common situation against newbies when you get the atajo and they think they have an opening when they really don't. They throw like this crazy cut and you just go for the easy disarm.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you're speaking kind of quickly, but I want to unpack what you just said, because
Sorry.
what I think you said was apropiado medio de proporcionado. Is that right?
Sí.
Yeah. Why don't you unpack that? I mean, that's a pretty sophisticated piece of theory, and I think my class knows what that is, but maybe you can talk through it a little bit.
So we have three important words in Destreza: propio, apropiado, y transferido. So when you have when you apply these words, it means the propio means you achieved it by yourself, apropiado means the other one gave it to you, and the transferido means that you stole it, basically. So when you say stuff like the medio proporcionado, remember that the medio proporcionado is the space, is the medio in which you can safely wound. When you use medio proporcionado propio, you mean that you achieved that point by yourself. Your opponent didn't do nothing. Apropiado means that he gave it to you. He screwed up somehow, and you can now, I don't know, stab him in the face, and he cannot do anything to you. And transferido means that you stole it. He tried to do a thrust, and you reduced yourself to the right angle and responded with a thrust to the face.
Perfect.
So yeah, exactly. It's just as you're explaining there in the chat.
All right, have we got any other questions? I have really enjoyed your lecture tonight, and I want to thank you so much for all of the help that you have given in the Destreza and the SEA group. I know you were really key to helping me unpack the definition of diversión, which was really useful. And because we had been doing it, but I don't think we had like latched that piece of jargon onto that technique.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for spending. I know it's really late where you are. So
Yeah, it's fine.
staying
It's
up
fine. Don't
super
worry.
late.
I had a lot of fun with you guys. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here.
All right.
Sure appreciate you joining us.
So
thanks, Eric.
Next week, we're going to host something that's a little bit like an Ask Me Anything, but it's going to be a group discussion, which we're going to call at the House of the Duke. We're going to host a classical Destreza dialogue, and Eric and I will prepare a series of questions, Destreza-related questions, and we will.
But we're going to ask you anything.
That's right. So come and be prepared to speak and have a good time and enjoy some fellowship. And we will talk about this with sort of a guided discussion.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and stay safe. And we will see you next week. And thank you, especially José Javier, for your time and your energy and your expertise. And give my best to Alberto and everyone there and tell them that we look forward to seeing them again.
Thank you, Buck. It's a pleasure being here.
All right. Adios, everyone.
Adios. Good night, people.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.